Lower decks, lower decks, lower decks, lower decks. I think it's down here to talk about season 4 of them there Star Trek Lower Decks. Moopsie. Anyway, sorry. There's a lot of new jokes that or catchphrases that really stick that came from season 4 of Lower Decks. You got the twaining, you got the moopsie. I'm sure there was something else. Anywho, welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4. In this video, I will review Season 4 of Star Trek Lower Decks as a whole, just looking at the entire season as a whole. So, I thought this was a pretty powerful season of Lower Decks. Maybe, I don't know if I'd say it's better than Season 3, but just as good as Season 3, which was also a great season. I think both Season 3 and 4 were better than the first two, so I think the show has improved. Even if it has stagnated a bit from the previous season, it's still better than the first 2 years, and it's still delivering really strong quality. Really great character stories, really great comedy. I don't know, because I said before that Strange New Worlds is easily my favorite show in modern Star Trek show in modern Trek, but I don't know, because season 2 I wasn't as great as season 1. And Lower Decks continues to be great, so maybe Lower Decks will end up being a show I like even more. But I don't know. I think it's fair to say that these two shows are definitely the best shows in modern Trek. Definitely better than Picard Season 3, which is overrated. And definitely better than Discovery, which is too much of a mixed bag. And, better than Prodigy, which Paramount Plus has disowned. But Prodigy's still good. I'm still going to be watching that. Paramount Plus shouldn't have disowned it. Anyway, Lower Decks Season 4. So this was one thing I want to praise this season for right off the bat is promoting it's all of this main characters. And in the first, I will say the first 2 episodes, since Rutherford didn't get promoted until episode 2, but that was just for a gag. That was a really funny gag. That was an awesome gag. That really worked. But anyway, they promoted their main characters in the very first episode, and that was bold. That was a bold Boimler choice. And this is something I've been talking about, and I've been talking about this with live discussions with my sister for the past couple of years, that they need to evolve these characters. They cannot make these characters stagnate. They need to show character growth. They need to show growth in their characters. And every year I'm worried that they're not going to do that the characters are just going to remain the same. And every year my worries are shown to be ridiculous because they absolutely don't do that. They absolutely show really good character growth with these characters. I think having them be promoted, something that never happened to Harry Kim in all 7 years of Voyager, it shows that Mike McMahon is a much smarter showrunner than Brennan Braga, who was just like, somebody has to be the ensign, which is stupid. It makes no sense. But anyway, and I've been on record saying before that Brennan Braga is not a good showrunner for Star Trek, but that's off topic. Back to Lower Decks. It is showing that it's in good hands. The show is in good hands with the writers, that they know not to just have the characters stagnate. They know to have grow the characters, have them evolve, but in ways that is incremental and doesn't completely destroy the foundation of the show and what it's about. It's about lower deckers, and as they mentioned in the first episode, they're still lower deckers. They're lieutenant junior grades, and they're actually becoming more integrated in the senior staff as well. So they're becoming less of lower deckers, but I think that's okay too. That's evolving the show. It doesn't go against its premise, because the Cerritos, by definition, is the lower decks of the entire Starfleet. So, and they made this clear with the whole California class, that they're sort of the lesser class, the less important ships. So even if these characters go through the ranks and get high promoted, if they're still in the Cerritos, they're still kind of the lower decks of Starfleet. So I don't think it defies the premise of the show at all. I think it just makes the show more interesting. In fact, I think it's absolutely needed, and I was worried that it wouldn't go in this direction to evolve and change, and it did. And out of it, you got some really great storylines. So we'll start with Mariner, because she was definitely front and center in this season, and I think what they did with her character story this season was actually really great. Because we had seen in previous seasons and we've heard as well, but we also saw it firsthand back in season 1, that she's been promoted before. So this is nothing new for her, and she hated the promotions. And in fact, there was a gag in the season 1 episode, if you remember, that Freeman promoted her, purposely trying to get her to resign or transfer to another ship because she was trying to get rid of her. So when she's promoted here, her reaction of, no, I don't want it, makes total sense. And then you get a storyline with her self-sabotaging and purposely trying to get demoted, but then sort of having an out with the Ransom, who refuses to demote her because he wants to believe in her. He knows that she's a good officer and wants her to succeed. And I think that was a great storyline. And then she realizes this and stops trying to self-sabotage, but then something inside of her it doesn't sit right with being promoted, and so this manifests itself in different ways. So instead of self-sabotaging, trying to get demoted, she ends up becoming very reckless and with her life, and putting herself in life-threatening situations purposely, constantly being entirely reckless. And this comes to a head in the penultimate episode of the season, when they're starting to notice this behavior because it's getting out of control. And then she's forced to confront her feelings and realize where this is coming from, and the fact that and they do a nice callback, which I don't think is a shameful, nostalgia baiting at all. I think it was a great callback to TNG, the episodes First Duty and Lower Decks, the namesake of this whole show, with Ensign Cito, and how Ensign Cito, died during a mission as helping a Cardassian spy return to Cardassian space, and they were saying that she was good friends with Cito at the academy, and that her death really negatively affected her. And then it got into a lot of the trauma that she felt, particularly during the Dominion War, and how that trauma affected her, and saying that she loved Starfleet for exploring and wanted to be an explorer, a scientist, not a general. She didn't want to be a soldier, and because of the militaristic aspects of Starfleet, that is what turned her off and wanting a promotion, because she didn't want to command her friends to die. And I think that was an amazing storyline. In fact, having her confront that and then eventually accept that Starfleet was a noble cause and that she should honor her friend Cito by honoring Starfleet. And that was a great character, growth for this character. So her whole character story this season, I thought was great. Even though I did point out a couple episodes did neglect this character story, so it's not like they were consistent with it, but that's fine. The payoff for it was so great at the end of the season, and Mariner's just always funny and a delight to have. Then you have Boimler, who didn't really feature front and center in the season very much, which I'm fine with. I mean, we don't always have to focus entirely on Boimler. But they did have the episode that dealt with him getting promoted, and again, he had his own self-doubts because he didn't feel like he had the right. Well, at first he didn't want the promotion in the very first episode because he didn't want to alienate his friends, because the last time he got promoted and went to the Titan, he felt like his friends were pissed off with him and alienated, and he didn't want that to happen again. But this time, like, Mariner gave him a pep talk and gave him the confidence to set things right, and so then he gladly accepted the promotion. And then the next episode, or a couple episodes later, dealt with him having to lead an away team of his peers who were still ensigns, and how he didn't feel like he had the right to order them around or put their lives in danger because he still saw them as his peers. But T'Len sort of spoke to him and gave him a pep talk as well about how he earned the right to be a lieutenant, and that he should trust his, officers to do the job and to honor Starfleet, and so actually put his life in danger to save them. So that was a great storyline for Boimler as well. So that was early in the season. So in the rest of the season, Boimler didn't really have that much to do other than twaining around or complaining about the room that he got, or becoming best friends with Rutherford. That was a nice little dynamic, having the bromance between him and Rutherford, something they didn't play up in previous seasons. But then he did have the storyline of the Agamas trying to outsmart the supercomputer, which he was always one step ahead of, so that was nice. And he got to be acting captain in the final episode, which was part of Freeman's plot to stop Nicholas Locarno. So he got to be captain, and Tendi pointed out he had a good captain's voice. So that was a good aspect for Boimler. Rutherford, the whole bit with him, like, wanting to get promoted because his friends all got promoted and he felt like he couldn't hang out with them anymore, and so he was trying to impress Billups, but then he had his adversary with Livik. That was absolutely hilarious. And then it found out that all it takes for him to get promoted was to ask, because he saved the ship on multiple occasions, which is something I'm glad the show acknowledged. But I mean, all these characters, arguably Boimler, Tendi, Mariner, have all saved the ship, and yet they didn't seem to acknowledge this. But Rutherford in particular, I think, has saved the ship several times, and so for them they made it so it was a nice joke, and it was a good, like, sort of acknowledgement of the fact that he did so many things, and you wonder why he wouldn't get promoted, but apparently they offered him several times. They tried to promote him, but he turned it down because he didn't want to leave his friends behind. And then, ironically, his friends all got promoted, and he's trying to get promoted too, but all it takes is for Tendi to go, "Hey, Billups, can you promote Rutherford for that time he saved the ship?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, sure." Just flips it, but takes it away from Livik and flips it to him. Absolutely hilarious. And you have Livik going, "Rutherford." Very, very good stuff. And I already mentioned the twaining between him and Boimler, and actually they brought it back in the finale and they brought Livik back in the finale when Livik and Rutherford when they're having a hard time working together to get the Orion battleship ready so they could defeat Nicholas or Locarno, and they solved their differences by twaining. Excuse me. In the holodeck, I say. And I think that was absolutely hilarious. But yeah, other than that, Rutherford, I guess, he had to confront Badgie. The whole Badgie thing, I think, was just a kind of a repeat of the other computer they had, the evil computer at the end of season 3, like where he called him father and was upset and wanted to kill everyone because of it. I felt like they've gone down this road, and they've done it with Badgie before himself, and I've never been a huge fan of Badgie, but didn't mind that episode too much because it did. I thought it was kind of funny how they would have Badgie split in half and be Logic-y, and then Gucci. And Gucci is still around. Apparently, he made a cameo in the finale, so he could reappear. But I'm glad that there's no more Badgie. I think that was dumb. So Rutherford definitely had something to do there. They finally played up the romantic aspect between Rutherford and Tendy's relationship, and where they had to pretend to be a married couple, and at first they were just joking about it and having fun, and until they started hitting on something personal, hitting on hidden feelings they didn't realize they had for each other when they started calling each other beautiful, and Rutherford was just like, oh, I love you, and then they were really uncomfortable with these feelings, and they had to pretend to be in love, and this made them super uncomfortable to the point where it got a bit ridiculous and sitcom-y. But I want to see these two get together. I really do, and I don't know. They are obvious friends, but I think they have a natural chemistry together, and I think that it would make sense, and they could, again, evolve their characters, which is what the show has been doing and continuing to evolve, and I think it would be the next natural, logical step, personally, but that's just me. But speaking of Tendi, we'll move over to her next. This is the storyline I'm not so happy with. With her, all of a sudden they're saying that she's the mistress of the winter. What is it? The mistress of the winter constellation. That she's this huge royalty, this like Orion pirate queen that everyone in Orion society bows down to. I think this comes out of nowhere, and I think it doesn't directly contradict anything that's stated in the show, but I think it contradicts the spirit of the character. Like, she was described as someone who wants to be a scientist, and who would always say not all Orions are pirates, and yet it seems like the show is going out of its way to defy this. Because I saw that as a really strong statement of not stereotyping. That Star Trek tends to stereotype all their aliens, all Klingons are fighters, all Ferengi are, swindlers and all this. And that the stereotypes. And there's been examples where they step outside these stereotypes, such as showing a Ferengi scientist and who didn't really care that much about profit, and that makes sense because even in all societies they're going to be outliers. Not everyone's going to live strictly by the thing, and so I kind of was disappointed in earlier seasons when they said that Tendi came from pirating past, not her family of pirates, but I was willing to go with it. I was like, I thought it went a bit against the spirit. But I was like, no, that's fine. Her family were pirates, but she wanted to fight and be a scientist. But I think it's a bridge too far to make her this huge queen that everyone immediately bows to, and she commands respect and can control everyone, and everyone who instantly sees her is like, oh my god, mistress of the winter constellation. I think that directly defies the spirit of her character. Even though she still hates it and she's like, oh, I just want to be a scientist, the fact that she even has that background, I think is very contradictory to the spirit of what they were trying to do with their character. And I don't like it. Because it feeds into those stereotypes. And they already did this with Billups as well, and I think they did it better with Billups. In fact, I wouldn't mind another episode with his background. And so on top of that, it just seems repetitive. And so, yeah, the episode where she went to Orion, had to find her sister, whatever, I really didn't like that. And then the finale ended on a cliffhanger with her having to return to her people. And I really didn't like that either. And I really don't like this cliffhanger, and I'm not looking forward to it being resolved in season 5. And it gets to the point where they Lower Decks is being a bit repetitive because it's always ending the season with a character leaving the ship with their fate being unknown. Boimler leaving in season 1, Freeman getting arrested at the end of season 2, and now you have Tendi leaving at the end of season 4. Now in season 3, Mariner left the ship, but that wasn't a cliffhanger finale. It was resolved by the end of the season. She returned to the ship by the end of the season, but still, as another example of someone leaving the ship and them, even though it wasn't a cliffhanger for the season, it was a cliffhanger for the episode. So it feels like they're just getting repetitive and just repeating the same beats over and over again with that. And plus, in this case, it involves that whole Ryan princess thing, which I hate. I hate that. And so I was really unhappy with what they did with Tendi this season. I was really especially unhappy with the cliffhanger. I think they need to stop doing the same thing. Stop ending the season with one of the main characters leaving the ship. Just stop. Anyway. Because she's going to be back in a couple episodes. And if she's not, then that would be even worse, to be clear. That would be absolutely worse. But anyway, as I said, the season was very unique, with some great introductions. First of all, I got to talk about the running storyline, because this is what really made the season unique, is that it had scenes in every episode that tied to a greater storyline of a ship appear out of nowhere and destroy different ships. And they would always have different alien race, and have show the lower deckers on that sort of being disgruntled with their command staff, and it would play heavily into the stereotypes, but I actually thought it was funny the way they did it, particularly with the Romulans when they're like, I'm going to deceive you. No, I'm going to deceive you. Like, that was hilarious. Or the Klingons just being like, fighting each other. I will tear you apart. What would you like to have lunch later? Yeah, sure. And they just chill out. And then you get the Ferengi, who are just being conniving and and scheming. And then you have the Bynars, which I think there should have been subtitles for the Bynars, because you couldn't understand anything that they were saying. You just heard them going on. Blah, 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 blah. And I also pointed out earlier, when the Bynars were with other humanoids, they should have spoke English or Federation Standard or whatever you want to call it, because they've done that before. It was shown clearly that when they communicate with other species, they can speak directly and go, you would have said no. Like, one says one part of the sentence and the other one. They should have done that. Why didn't they do that? But anyway, so that running storyline through the season really worked. And it wasn't just like a few scenes out of nowhere. Sometimes it played directly into the plot of the episode, like when the Betazoid debutantes came on board. They were actually there to glean more information about these ships, and they ended up giving that information to Freeman at the end. And also Badgie was encountering the Bynar ship that was destroyed and using that, and Artemis had the information about the ships and was using that as leverage to try to, plot his evil schemes or whatever. So sometimes it did tie directly into the episodes, and I think the payoff for the storyline in the last 2 episodes were definitely worth it, because throughout the season, as they were setting this up, I'm like, all right, this is a lot of build up. They better pay this off. And I think they did. I think they absolutely did pay it off in a very satisfying way. That worked for the show. I think having it be Nicholas Locarno, a callback to a one-off character from TNG, but one who was played by the same actor who played Tom Paris, which allowed for some humor, that worked. I think that was, and it tied into the Mariner thing with Cedo, because that was, Cedo and Locarno were in the same squadron, and how they tied it in with all the different aliens that have been captured, how the lower deckers had to work with them. So that was really good. Now, I did talk about all the lower deckers, but I forgot to mention T'Len. This is actually, it's hard for me to even imagine this, but this is actually the first season where T'Len is a main or reoccurring character. Because previously she only appeared in the end of season 2 in the Wage Juge episode. And then at the very end of season 3, they showed that she joined the crew. But it was more of a cameo. But this is the first time we get her as a regular reoccurring character. Although we did go, I believe, 3 episodes in a row without having her, which was a shame. But she was a nice comedic foil. She worked so well in Sir. I wasn't even sure how well she would work in Sir with the lower deckers, but she absolutely worked absolutely amazing. She would just time in as like the straight man type comedic punch to the lower deckers, like a Mariner for saying, "Oh, well, you have the same disease as Spock's dad, and Spock's dad was Vulcan as a motherfucker." And she's like, "Oh, by that logic, I must also be Vulcan as a motherfucker." Or when they were on Orion, and Mariner was talking about one of the Orion guys being like very hot, or meat pie, or whatever, and T'Len's just like, "Yes, he is very aesthetically pleasing." Like that kind of 1-2 punch that really worked. Or like when she was convincing Boimler, who wouldn't put his subordinates in danger, to help the mission, she convinced him to have faith in them and to have them help. And so then Boimler's just like, "All right, T'Len says I have to put you all in danger." And she's just like, "That is not how I would state it." Yeah, so but she had a good character story this season as well. Because she starts the season with not wanting to be there, and she gets promoted with everyone else at the start, and she's like, "I don't really care because I just want to get back to the Vulcan ship," and so so the whole time she's just wanting to get back to the Vulcan ship, and this comes to a head in her own episode, in episode 5. Where she has the Bendai syndrome, causing everyone to go crazy. But then through her conversation with Mariner is made to see that her old crew did not appreciate her, and that they were treating her unfairly by kicking her off, and they didn't see the value in her. And then the more she worked with the lower deckers, the more she realized that they did appreciate her, that they did see, or even not just the lower deckers, but the Cerritos crew, I should say. They did appreciate her, and they did see her value. So by the end of the season, she's like, "I don't even want to go back to the Vulcan ship." And I think that storyline was absolutely earned, and a good character story for T'Len as well. So I love this character, and apparently Mike McMahon says that she's going to appear in season 5 even more, which I am so hyped about. I'm so glad that they're going to show this character even more in season 5. I think she's definitely really gave this show a boost. And I don't know why they took so long to introduce her. Like, they first introduced her in season 2. Why wasn't she in season 3? But anyway, she's here now. And she really brings something special to the show. So we did get a couple of, as I said, they introduced some new aspects to the show, such as Livik, Twining, but one of my favorites is the Moopsie, which I want to see the Moopsie again return. I just thought it was a good gag, that it was something that looked really cute, and just going around going, oopsie, and then saying it in such a cute way, but then it was the most vicious, vile, disgusting thing that would just suck the bones right out of you, which is a bit ridiculous, in a good way, to be clear. And then you had the Betazoid debutantes who turned out to be spies. I thought that was a nice little twist. You had a Rom and Lita cameo. That's always something interesting. And just having Nicholas Locarno be the big bad and bringing back the Genesis device. But then you also had old characters that were in previous seasons return, such as Badgie, Peanut Hamper, and Artemis, and they all returned in the same episode. Peanut Hamper I'm not a huge fan of, but I think in this, I didn't really mind her inclusion in this season because, first of all, they foreshadowed it in the last season, and so to not, especially if they're going to bring back Artemis, which you have to because Jeffrey Combs' Artemis is amazing. I love this character. I want to see this character more of, and he was absolutely hilarious in this episode, and I think Peanut Hamper kind of just serviced his storyline. Was just the motivation for his storyline. So they're going to bring back this character. Yeah, just don't focus on her and just use her as a crutch for a much better character, Artemis. And it did kind of irritate me that she actually found redemption in this episode, which was after that terrible fake out redemption in the previous season, but I still see that as a problem with the previous season, more so than this one. But yeah, bringing Artemis back was great. I want to see more of him. I think he was absolutely hilarious in this episode where he was like turning himself blue. He was going, it would turn blue. And it's like, look, I see the blue light. I'm actually good now. And then Boyman was like, oh yeah, the blue light is kind of soothing. And then at the end, he was like, I'm going to be with my friend again and we're going to have fun. And just all the jokes they made by the evil computers in the rehab center were hilarious. So even though I had mixed feelings about that episode because not a fan of Peanut Hamper, not that much of a fan of Badgie either. But as I said, I kind of liked the stuff they did with Good-G and Logic-E. And I did like the ending where he like ascended or whatever was kind of silly. Like I didn't hate it, but it was just like whatever. But I did love the Artemis stuff in that episode. So I'm trying to think now. We also, of course, had the Voyager callback episode, like because last season we did a DS9 episode. This season we got a Voyager one, which unfortunately actually didn't feature any cameos from Voyager characters. I mean, not from voice actors. We did get some cameos from previous Voyager characters, like deep cuts like the Microvirus and the Captain Proton. Not Captain Proton, his villain, Chaotica. That's good. Chaotica and that Irish pub guy, Sullivan or whatever his name is, and the clown from the Thaw. But those, I don't know. It was okay. I mean, it was nice callbacks, but I saw it a bit more as nostalgia baiting. And I didn't really appreciate them focusing on Tuvix because I hate that episode. I do think that they are making fun of the flaws in it. But then again, people would like this episode think they were paying tribute to it. And that just doesn't make me sit right with me that they would pay tribute to an episode that I fucking hate with all my passion. But anyway, but on the other hand, they also did point out how stupid that was because when the characters joined together, they acted absolutely nothing like the other characters and all of a sudden turned evil, which makes no sense. So I think that's directly poking fun at Tuvix and how Tuvix all of a sudden was being a narcissistic asshole and acting absolutely nothing like Tuvok and Neelix, which he was supposed to be. But maybe I'm just self-justifying this in my head. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So my favorite episodes this season were definitely the I Have No Bones Yet I Must Flee one with the Moopsie and Mariner and Ransom having it out. I thought that was a nice character movement. And then, of course, I had the side plot with Rutherford trying to get promoted and going Olivik, which was hilarious. So that was definitely one of my favorites of the season. Another one of my favorites has got to be the penultimate episode, The Inner Fight, which again dealt with the Great Mariner story, and she had her confession about Cedo, but it also, dealt with her risky behavior, suicidal behavior, and then like working together with all those aliens trapped on the planet. So that was a great episode, but my favorite episode of this season has got to be in Pathological Fallacies with the Betazoid debutantes and T'Lyn, because first of all, this episode is absolutely hilarious. Like, the jokes were just nonstop, such as when the Cerritos almost went into the Romulan neutral zone, turned around at the last second, and you saw the Romulans all go, "Oh!" Like, I lost my shit at that. And all the jokes with all the crew acting all crazy and like getting, half naked and making a human pyramid and going, "Yeah!" Well, Freeman's like, "I'm sure they're going to get me out of this." And just the character story for T'Lyn, as I mentioned before, was really strong in this episode. And the pep talk she had with Mariner was a really heartfelt moment. So, yeah, so this was probably my favorite of the season. Now, as for my least favorite episodes of the season, one of them is Caves, just because I think that episode is very mediocre. It manufactures this dilemma where the lower deckers are starting to drift apart because they hadn't told themselves these important stories before, and they haven't been spending much time together. But we actually never saw this on screen. They seem to be totally friendly and close in all the previous episodes, so this felt manufactured and not true to the show. And just other than that, the whole episode was really mediocre. Wasn't really that funny or that heartfelt. It was just kind of meh, not terrible, but just like definitely Lower Decks could do better. And then, of course, my least favorite's got to be the Something Barred, Something Green, which I already talked about, that dealt with Tendi going to Orion, her homeworld, and doing the drinking game with the poisonous bug that's going to kill you and all this other bullshit, which I just don't like. I really didn't like that whole storyline. But overall, huge fan of the season. So my rating for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4 as a whole is going to be a 9. Excellent. Very, very strong season. I think just as strong as Season 3. I'm not sure if you put a gun to my head and said I had to choose which season is better. I don't really know. I'd have to go back and rewatch Season 3, honestly. But I think it's, at the least, it's just as good as Season 3. And because, it continues to move these characters forward by promoting them, which I'm glad they were smart enough, bold enough to do that. Introduces T'Lyn into the storyline, who adds a great dynamic. It has a long-term story arc that ran throughout the season, even though each episode was still episodic, is still in the background, which I like. It gave nice atmosphere. It did other great things with the characters, particularly with Mariner, having her have a great character story dealing with the issues she had with getting promoted, but also touching on the other characters in their own way and how getting promoted affected them and the new dynamic, and most importantly of all, remains funny as hell, which is the most important aspect. So yes, I'm going to give Lower Decks Season 4 a 9. So that is it for my review of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4. Thanks so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please check out my channel. As I cover many other Star Trek videos at the moment. I'm going through Star Trek Next Generation, covering every episode of that. I'm currently doing Season 2 of TNG. You can check that out. Also, check out my channel for many other Star Trek videos. I also do a live stream every month, counting down my top 25 favorite episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise. Later this month sometime, I will be doing my number 17, so keep an eye out for that. And just check out my channel for many more videos of many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.